Welcome everybody to ASCP and the Rogue Pharmacist, Benjamin Knight Fuchs. I am Tracy Donnelly, Executive Director of Associated Skincare Professionals, and I'm going to take a minute here to ask the listeners something. Have you all heard of Associated Skincare Professionals, also known as ASCP? Well, if you haven't, this is the only professional association exclusively for licensed estheticians. So, if you don't know about us and you're an esthetician, I encourage you to join because we offer professional liability insurance, subscription to an award-winning Skin Deep magazine, free hosted website, on-demand access to continuing education, and a suite of other career resources. Okay, so joining me today and co-hosting is Maggie Stasek, our very own education manager, and of course, the star of the show today, Ben Fuchs. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hey, Tracy.
I think you're the star of the show. I'm the guest. You're the star.
Oh, no. Okay, I am so excited for today because we are going to be discussing healthy gut, healthy skin. Well, I'm super interested in this topic. I mean, anybody who isn't living under a rock knows that everything is about gut health, right? But I'm super excited because we're going to really get into it and find out, like, what does that mean for an esthetician? How can they really chat with their clients to help with better results in their skin? So should we just jump into it, guys?
Yeah. I love how you said everybody knows, because I remember when I started talking about the relationship between the digestive system and the skin, when I first started talking about skin health, people thought I was kind of crazy. And I remember some gal, a teacher saying, oh, Ben just thinks everything has to do with the digestive system. And to me, as a pharmacist and as a lover of biology and the skin, it was just logical that everything would come to that all skin health issues and all health issues, in fact, would be related to the digestive system. So here's the deal. In the Bible, it says, in Leviticus, it says, the life of the body is in the blood, right? The blood distributes everything. So if you have a health problem, you have a blood problem, period. There's no such thing as a health problem, except for trauma, perhaps, that's not related somehow to the blood, because the blood's distributing everything. I like to say all disease is cell disease, and all cell disease is related to dirty blood. So everything boils down to dirty blood.
I don't want dirty blood. That sounds terrible.
Sounds terrible, right?
Yeah.
Dirty, sticky blood. Even this latest health infection that everybody's talking about the last couple of years, people think it's a respiratory problem. It's not a respiratory problem. It's a blood problem.
Wow.
And people who are more predisposed to cardiovascular health issues, high blood pressure, for example, or heart disease, are more at risk for becoming symptomatic or actually dying from this current health infection because it's a blood problem. And if you understand how the body's put together, it makes perfect sense, because how do things get spread and disseminated through the body is through the blood. So you got to have the blood clean. And we can talk about different ways of cleaning the blood, and that's a very, very important strategy. But then the question becomes, how does the blood get dirty in the first place? Well, the blood is encased inside the body. It doesn't have any openings except for 3. There's 3 portals into the bloodstream. And these 3 portals are going to be the determining factor on how clean or not clean the blood is. So the 3 portals into the bloodstream are the respiratory tract through the nose. You can get things into the bloodstream through the nose. But realistically speaking, that's not going to happen too much aside from oxygen and some gases, because you have a lot of filtering in the nose and in the respiratory tract. The second place where things get into the blood is through the skin. But that's not going to happen very often, because the skin is a pretty solid barrier, which we've talked about in the past. But it's why you want to be very careful about injecting things through the skin. And in fact, injecting things through the skin can lead to all kinds of health problems, ranging from autoimmunity to toxic blood, sepsis to infections, etc. So you can bypass the skin and get things into the blood if you inject. Sometimes some people will say, oh, everything you put on your skin gets into your blood. That's not necessarily true, but there are skincare ingredients and skincare products that can migrate through the surface of the skin and get into the blood, but that doesn't happen a lot.
Transdermal, is that?
Transdermal.
Okay.
Transdermal.
Got it.
And there are ingredients that can get in there, especially if you use them over and over again, like preservatives, for example, can do that. Sunscreens can do that. But for the most part, the skin is a pretty solid barrier. Then there's the third portal into the blood. The third portal into the blood is not only the main way that things get into the bloodstream, but things are supposed to get into the bloodstream through this third portal, which is, of course, the intestine, right? So it's designed to make things go into the bloodstream. You're protected through the respiratory tract, through the nose, and you're protected through the skin, but you're somewhat protected, we'll say, through the intestine. But because the intestine's main role is to put things into the bloodstream, this is the major portal, the major entry of stuff into the blood. Now, if you're eating correctly, most of the things that get into the intestine are things you ate, right? So if you're eating correctly, that's not much of an issue. But who the heck eats correctly?
No one.
No one, right? Okay, that's not problem number one. Problem number two, which is related to problem number one, is when you don't eat correctly, the lining of the digestive tract starts to break down. And then instead of things getting into the bloodstream in an organized and an orderly fashion, things sneak into the bloodstream. They leak into the bloodstream.
That's what they call leaky gut.
That's exactly right. They call that
it.
leaky gut. So the intestine, for several reasons, is the main portal of entry of the bad guys into the blood. Once things get into the bloodstream, you're off to the disease races, because the blood is obviously the blood is disseminating things, it's spreading things throughout the body. So through evolution and biology, the blood is very protected. When stuff gets into the blood that's not supposed to get into the bloodstream, a 4-alarm fire, a 5-alarm fire, an alert is sent out into the bloodstream, and immune cells start to get into the bloodstream to segregate, to protect the rest of the body from this toxin, this stuff that got into the blood inappropriately. And you end up with this circulating mass of bad guys surrounded by immune cells. They actually call them CICs, circulating immune complexes. And these CICs are just these toxic masses. Now, if it happens once in a while, that's not a problem. But for most of us, it's happening from birth to death. It's happening from the time we're born, when we're eating formula or we're drinking formula, to the time we die and our last meal is McDonald's and ice cream. And all throughout our lifetimes, we're subjecting our intestine and our blood to these immune reactions, which involve these complexes and fibers and white blood cells, i.e. pus. Now, that's bad enough in the blood, because the blood is supposed to be pristine, it's supposed to be clean. And once you have these complexes in the bloodstream, this interferes with the delivery of things, because now the blood is like a toxic river. And this is the metaphor of a toxic river or a polluted river is a real good metaphor to think of, because that's really what the bloodstream is. The blood is, the technical term for the blood, or the Greek term for blood, is rheuma, like rheumatism or rheumatoid. We have rheumatologists who study the blood, who study the toxicity of the blood. Rheuma also means river. So the blood is like a river, and you can think of it like being a toxic river. And it's bad enough if you have all these toxins and all these immune complexes in the blood. Now you're not going to get effective delivery of nutrients, and effective delivery of oxygen, and effective delivery of toxins, or effective delivery of effective removal of toxins. So problem number one is, now you've got these toxicity in the blood. You've got all this pus, and literally pus. Can you imagine this in the blood?
That's gross.
And fibers. It's really gross, right?
Yeah.
So now you've interfered with delivery of nutrients. You've interfered with delivery of oxygen. You've interfered with detoxification. But it gets worse. When I was a kid, I had a messy room. Most boys probably had messy rooms. My room was really messy. Mine was like hideously messy. And my mom used to tell me to clean up my room. And I had discovered somewhere around my fifth or sixth year of life a really quick way to clean up my room.
I know what you're going to say. Oh my gosh. Okay.
And I could clean it, no matter how messy it was, I could clean it in like 5 minutes, and it would be amazingly clean, right? So what did I do? You
shoved everything either under your bed or in your closet.
No, under the bed.
Okay.
Under the bed.
I did it too. I admit it.
Right. And it was really handy, right? And as a little kid, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool, right? Well, the body does the same thing. It takes the toxicity that's in the bloodstream and it shoves it under the bed, except the bed is the connective tissue. And the connective tissue is the great dumping ground of circulatory toxicity. And what happens then is you now have distorted cells in the connective tissue. Also, soft tissue will get some of these deposits as well. And now you've distorted the cells of the connective tissue and distorted the cells of the various organs. When the cells of the organs and the connective tissue are distorted, now you have this, what's perceived by the body as an enemy in the body. And this enemy itself initiates an immune response. So now you have all the toxins in the connective tissue and all the toxicity in the very soft tissues, the organs, the glands and the organs. This initiates an immune response against the body, against the connective tissue, against the glands. Guess what that's called? That's called autoimmunity. And that's the mechanism of autoimmunity. And the medical model still doesn't even recognize this, but everybody who has an autoimmune disease will know that when they stop eating or when they fast,
they feel better.
They feel better.
Yeah.
Their autoimmune symptoms stop. And they'll also notice that when they eat certain foods, their autoimmune systems spike. So don't wait for the medical model to catch up to common sense. If you understand or biological common sense, if you understand the mechanism here, you'll see how all this is put together.
And aren't we seeing even more autoimmune disorders coming out there every day?
We're eating foods, not only that the human body didn't grow up with, we're eating foods today that didn't even exist a mere 50 years ago. 100 years ago. Our food supply has completely changed. And so our bodies are millions of years old from an evolutionary perspective, and our entire food supply has changed over the last couple hundred years. So of course it's going to get worse. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. And now you have all these, now you don't even have real meat, fake meats and stuff. Have you heard of these tested meats?
Beyond meat.
Beyond meats,
yeah.
right? Mm-hmm. These are foods that the human body is not supposed to ingest. And whether you're a vegetarian or you like meat, I'm not getting into that. But the point is, these are foods that the body doesn't recognize. So yes, the problem is getting worse. So you have the problem of autoimmunity and immune reactions. You have the problem of dirty blood. And then you come to the skin. The skin is one of the major dumping grounds of these toxins. And this can lead to all kinds of health issues involving sensitive skin and involving rosacea skin and involving skin that has that's rashy, that's constantly red, constantly inflamed, itchy, urticaria, itchiness. All of these are related to this idea of things getting dumped into the skin.
Can I share a story with you, Ben?
Sure.
I worked for a doctor as an esthetician, and one of his patients was passed to me, and she had severe acne, like very cystic. And I couldn't treat her. I couldn't touch her. It was so inflamed. And I was entering in notes after seeing her and had seen his notes that she was not having bowel movements. She would go like weeks at a time without having a bowel movement.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I mean, like basically,
where does all that toxin, she was like go?
Pooping out of her face.
Oh my God.
Exactly. The toxins back up, and constipation is like an epidemic. The amount, and there's all kinds of issues for constipation involving the thyroid, involving estrogen, but the intestine itself can go into a freeze response when it's attacked over and over again. So constipation can be directly related to certain foods, particularly dairy, by the way, which is, is a national obsession, dairy type foods. But it gets even worse. Okay, that's bad enough, right?
That's pretty bad.
That's pretty bad, everything we just said, right?
Yeah.
But it gets even worse because the intestine is where nutrients are absorbed. So now you've got this damage to the intestine, this inflammation in the intestine, you've got this leaky gut. Now you've compromised the absorption of nutrients, especially your fatty nutrients, which are much harder to absorb than your watery nutrients. And the skin is especially dependent on fatty nutrients and fatty nutrition. So you've got toxicity entering into the bloodstream through leaky gut. You've got toxins being dumped into the various tissues and into the skin, and you've got nutritional deficiencies. And all of this kind of adds up with each other, that compounds. You can't help but have problem skin. And even if that problem skin is just something like accelerated aging, you may not have like a frank problem like psoriasis, which is a classic food problem, eczema, which is a classic food problem, acne, which can be a classic food problem. You may just have skin that's getting thin. You may just have skin that's getting old, that's aging at an accelerated pace. You may have skin that is hyperpigmenting, darkening. So there are all kinds of mechanisms for skin diseases being related to food, which is the bad news. But the good news is so good.
Tell me, I need to hear the good news, Ben. I really do, because I'm feeling bad.
Because all you got to do is correct the food. All you got to do is correct the food problem.
And you can see a quick result?
Instant.
What?
Instant.
When do we ever get instant ever in our life anywhere?
As close to instant as you can imagine, like within a day.
That's huge.
Can you imagine this? I have seen eczema disappear. I've seen acne completely disappear, never to be returned again. In the world of medicine, you can never say the word cure. That's like this verboten word if you say the word cure, right? But you don't have to cure. You reverse. It in effect cures, because once you stop the flow of toxicity into the body, the immune response stops. Now, you do have to make sure you're nutriating correctly, and there are specific nutrients. In fact, there's a whole slew of nutrients that are specific for the digestive system. But the most important thing you can do if you have any skin problem, in fact, any health problem at all, but especially for our purposes here, the skin, is do a food diary. Write down, and I think we've talked about this before.
Yeah, well, I mean,
you said you were doing one.
I'm actually doing one right now because I'm doing some more investigating on my leaky gut.
Isn't it amazing what you find out?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and I do have to say, to your point, it is a quick change.
It's
literally one day of eating the foods that I'm supposed to be eating.
Yeah,
it's
even
crazy.
fasting, just one day of not eating. Fasting, most people go cradle to grave without ever giving their digestive system a day off. Just give your digestive system a break, just one day off. There's also nutrients that you can take, wonderful nutrients for the digestive system. But I want to add one really interesting thing here. there's a very important relationship between leaky gut and fried fats and processed fats. In fact, fried fats and processed fats, which everybody loves, right?
Yeah, we love it.
Yes,
you smell
everybody loves
it, and you're
right?
like, and
you don't really necessarily love the fried fats. It's the fats that we love. And we are very fat deficient. Butter's awesome. Who doesn't like butter?
And ghee.
Right? And ghee is awesome, right?
That's my new thing.
And so, you can have good fats, but our caloric reliance on fried fats wreaks havoc on the digestive system and processed fats. In fact, a vast majority of our health problems and our health epidemic began around the turn of the 20th century, the late 19th century, when guess what? We discovered how to make fake fried fats, or fake fats, I should say, shortening, Crisco.
Oh, okay. So not like the soybean and seed oils.
No, that's bad too.
Oh, okay.
That's bad too.
I'm jumping ahead.
That's bad too. But shortening was a revolution in cooking, because until we discovered how to process fats to create shortening, we were dependent on lard. And lard was very expensive, but lard, as most people know who cook, and fried fats create really interesting textures in crusts and in foods, especially in starchy foods. Starches, if you look at a starchy food like a piece of corn or flour or some kind of a grain, under a microscope, you'll see little squares, tiny little squares. They actually call them cells, not like biological cells, but little openings like cells. And these cells are very interesting because when fat goes into those cells and hardens, it creates an irresistible crispiness, an irresistible crunchiness. And human beings find that crunchiness impossible to stay away from.
The perfect French fry? I mean, you're like, I'm going to find that perfect French fry. I'll eat this whole package of them.
But you don't want just French fry. You wouldn't like just French fries. You want French fries with one other ingredient, a magical pixie dust. Yes, exactly.
More salt, the better.
Exactly.
Every color salt, black, white. Yes.
And human beings need this combination of fat and salt and sugar. The starch is sugar. And this combination of fat from the fried fat and the sugar from the starch and the salt from the salt that you put on top there, right? You look at you, you're smiling.
I'm salivating.
Everybody does. Everybody does. So what you want to do, there's ways you can hack into this. I think we probably talked about that. And that's by finding a good source of sugar that's natural, which is vegetables. Vegetables are actually very sweet if you cook them just right. You release the sugars. Even bitter vegetables have a sweetness to them. Like onions are classically sweet if you start to heat them.
Oh, they are. Yeah,
right?
That's true.
Right? And also broccoli has a sweetness to it if you cook it just right. So what you want to do is you want to take your veggies and steam it to release the sugar, put lots of delicious butter or ghee on top of it, or nutritional oil like Udo's Blend on top of it, and then Celtic sea salt or Himalayan salt to get all of your minerals. And it's just as delicious as French fries, and it won't interfere with digestive health. So the relationship between fried fats and processed fats and skin health ultimately, but in the middle of it, digestive health and then autoimmune health is very underappreciated. And if anybody's dealing with a skin issue, a long-term chronic skin issue, or a joint issue, or an inflammatory issue inside the body, or an autoimmune issue, laying off the fats and laying off the processed foods.
Shouldn't they just fast for one day?
Yeah,
I mean, just one day and then just write your food down
that's
for
what I was
3
saying.
days.
You were talking about the food diary.
Yeah.
It helps to fast for a couple of days before you do the food diary, because then you'll really notice things. When you don't fast, if you eat the same foods over and over again, you don't notice certain kinds of reactions that you have. But if you fast for a couple of days, you notice things really dramatically. It's a really profound kind of reaction that you have. And then you can really start to hone in on your problem foods. You can still do it without fasting, but it helps to fast.
Okay.
And then you eliminate the problem foods. And how hard is that?
It's not. I mean, once you know, and then if you get a little break from it, you're not addicted. But I have a question for you because I'm dying to know this. So you've talked about, your intestines, how you're absorbing things, leaky gut. So your intestines are broken, let's say, right? So how do you patch them up? How do you make sure that it's not broken anymore?
Because there are ways to do it.
Okay.
For one thing, laying off the food, or laying off problem food, or even fasting can help. But there's wonderful nutrients that build a healthy gut. Collagen and collagen peptides and collagen builders. Gelatin has traditionally been used as a digestive health supplement. Gelatin is a source of collagen. Probably the most important, the one that everybody knows about, is good bacteria, probiotics. Probiotics can be found either in supplements or in certain foods, fermented foods.
Why does that work? I mean, we hear probiotics. I hear it all the time. But why does it?
Well, it's a lot more we can talk about in a minute or two.
I get so excited.
Yes, but probiotics are very important because when we're born, I don't know if I don't.
We probably don't, and I think we even mentioned a little bit before.
We may have mentioned it.
Like
bacteria,
but we'll get back.
Bacteria detoxify things. They break down foods. They make vitamins, make nutrients. They support the health. They communicate. They literally communicate with the cells of the intestine. There's crosstalk between the bacteria and the cells of the intestine, and the bacteria will tell the cells of the intestine to divide or not divide or do their business. So there's this relationship between bacteria, which are not us. They're their own creatures, and us. These things are communicating to each other, and it's kind of interesting when you think about it. How we said the intestine is the source of everything, digestive system is the source of everything. Not quite. The bacteria are the source of everything, and because most of us when we're born, we're either born cesarean section, so we don't get the bacterial bath that's supposed to come in to our bodies through vaginal birth. Even if we are born normally, we're not breastfed long enough, and breast milk is one of the ways that the cells of the intestine and the bacteria in the intestine proliferate, or we're not breastfed long enough, or we're not breastfed at all, or we're breastfed from mothers who are nutritionally incompetent themselves, so we don't get healthy breast
Which,
milk.
I mean, now you've almost mentioned 90% of the babies born.
Exactly.
If not 95.
Exactly. It's getting better. Now we're starting to recognize how important gut bacteria are for the baby when they're born. But for people our age or even younger, when it wasn't recognized, there's still, and even to this day, there's still babies who are getting formula just normally. They're just getting formula. There are people who have cesarean sections, moms who have cesarean sections voluntarily because they don't want to. I
think that happens all the time.
They want to deal with the vaginal birth part of it. So for a lot of reasons, we are born compromised. We're from the time we're born, of course, that just tumbles out of control after that. So getting on a good probiotic supplement is very important, but they're tricky. It's not easy to get on a good probiotic supplement. Also, fermented food is another good
Mention
good
the types of fermented foods real quick.
Miso, tempeh, sauerkraut, fermented beets. I know we're there's so much more, but just real quick, another thing to not underestimate is the importance of stomach acid. A lot of us are achlorhydric or hypochlorhydric, meaning low or no stomach acid. And it's very ironic because the number one best-selling over-the-counter drug next to aspirin is antacids, because everybody thinks they have too much stomach acid. And it's very rare, actually, that you make too much stomach acid. It's much more common to make too little. So apple cider vinegar with meals is a great way to replace stomach acid. Or
kombucha.
Or kombucha, absolutely, and fermented foods in general. One of the things that bacteria do in fermented foods is they make acid. So fermented foods tend to be acidic, and that's another great way to get acid.
Ben, can you ever throw your gut into disharmony with too many supplements, the wrong probiotic?
The wrong probiotic won't throw your gut into distress, but it may make you have some symptoms, especially neurological symptoms.
Ooh.
And there are people who get side effects from the wrong kinds of probiotics. And probiotics are tricky because they're not really like normal supplements. They're very unique in the world of supplements because they're alive. So you're actually eating something that's living or that was living, whereas most supplements are like minerals or vitamins or amino acids or fatty acids. They're molecules, they're not alive. So probiotics are the trickiest of all supplements. My favorite, next to the blood, my favorite, I think the most important biological fluid and the one most underappreciated is bile. And bile is critical for the skin for a lot of reasons, but probably the most important is the fatty vitamins and the fatty nutrients, which bile helps us get out of food. So bile problems, gallbladder problems, intestinal problems, liver problems, all of these will compromise fatty nutrient absorption and ultimately will show up as sensitive skin, barrier problems with the skin, dry skin. Pretty much all the skin problems we have can be related one way or another to either malabsorption of nutrition or this whole leaky gut mechanism.
So it's kind of like follow the trend line. I mean, if you're having liver issues or what have you, I mean, follow where it goes. It's going to go right on your face, right? I mean, that's the big flashing sign.
If you have a skin problem, whatever it is, whether it's something as severe as psoriasis or acne or something that's dramatic, or even if it's something that's as benign as dry skin or hyperpigmentation, backtrack to the digestive system.
So good. I think we could actually do a whole nother podcast on this. And so if you guys out there listening, literally let us know if you want to know more about it. Just go to our social media handle. That's at ASCP Skincare and let us know what you think. But that is going to wrap our show for today. And as always, if you're not an ASCP member, please join today at ascpskincare.com. And if you loved, and how could you not love this episode, please, please, please subscribe and tell all your friends to listen to it. Details from what we discussed today will be in the show notes. And also, if you can't get enough of Ben Fuchs, and who can't, right? We love him. Our Rogue Pharmacist, you can listen to his syndicated radio program at thebrightside.com.